My guest today starred in the groundbreaking documentary The Game Changers. He is also the winner of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. He is going to be speaking at the Fairfax Veg Fest on Sunday, April 24th. He is Mr. James Wilks. Thank you so very much for being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
My man, it is an absolute pleasure. The Game Changers, man. I mean, just so well received, so many views. I think that it broke some records with downloads on Apple and iTunes initially. So, congratulations on all of the success. My first question to you is, how has your life changed since the movie came out?
Yeah, obviously the pandemic happened and that sort of changed a few things. But before the pandemic, it was difficult for me to go anywhere without, people coming up to me and talking about the film and how it had influenced them. And so, just getting noticed a lot, the gym, or you're going to the restaurant or Home Depot or wherever you are, people coming up saying, thanks so much for making the film. My family's gone mostly plant-based, or we've gone completely plant-based. I've got off some medication. I've lost 50 or 100 pounds. I just hear different stuff, every day, both in person and online. With the pandemic, obviously, and the in-person stuff sort of calmed down. But that's picking back up again now that we're hopefully on the tail end of this pandemic.
For sure. Your father featured prominently in the documentary too. And I know, at least, around the office here, a lot of people are wondering, well, I wonder, how he's doing these days. So how is your dad?
Yeah, no, he's doing really well. Seems to be in the clear with all the checks and tests that he's getting. And so just helpful that I could have been influential in that with helping him shift, towards plants. So yeah, he's doing really well. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, of course, of course. What about among other professional athletes? I know, having worked as a sports reporter in a previous life, that a lot of times they're going to be inclined to try basically anything to get an edge up, a leg up on the competition. And so I suspect that there are many undercover vegans in the NFL, Major League Baseball, MLS, NBA, you name the league. How many of these athletes have you heard of since the film's release who have become inquisitive?
Oh, we've had a lot of people reach out from all those leagues, gold medalists from the Olympics, just a vast range of high-level athletes reaching out, asking for help. And like you said, some of them are sort of undercover too. Some of them don't really want people to know about it or to talk about it. When we're making the film, some people didn't want to be interviewed because they said, well, I feel like it gives me the competitive edge, and I don't want people knowing my secret. But I think now, since the film's come out, people are realizing that you can really actually get both a health but also a performance advantage, given that a lot of the same biological mechanisms that impact health also impact performance, such as blood flow, inflammation, and so forth, endothelial function. And so I think it's really becoming recognized that a plant-based diet can actually, give you a benefit in athletic performance. And so just more and more people seem to be trying it.
In addition to performance, what would you say it could do to prolong an athlete's career?
Yeah, obviously in the acute phase, right, all of that inflammation can impair your workout and your recovery. And then as that adds up over time, that can certainly, if you don't deal with that, those injuries and that inflammation in the acute phases, that could potentially impact you chronically. So over time, that could certainly shorten a career. But if you do the right things, right, with a good diet and lifestyle, so eating a plant-predominant diet, getting good sleep, trying to reduce stress or deal with stress in better ways. If you can do all of those things, then I do absolutely think that you can have a longer career in whatever sport it is. And you can see that with, people like Serena Williams or Tom Brady, who's obviously just retired recently, but, shifting towards plants to extend their careers.
You think Brady's coming back, or do you think that he hung it up for good?
I don't know. To be honest, being from England, I don't know much about it. I just went to the college football playoffs recently. That was the first college football game I'd ever watched, because I went and gave the keynote speech there at the college football playoffs as regards to nutrition. But other than that, I don't actually know. I'm not a huge football fan, being from England, more rugby and things like that. But I have no idea what his plans will be.
No worries about that. The fact that you were invited to speak at the college football playoffs, being the keynote speaker for nutrition, that is amazing to me. Do you think that the idea of eating this way is really something, especially these younger athletes are gravitating toward.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think one, we've presented the science, and so I think the younger audience are sort of more into looking at the science and the information. I also think that the younger generation is also more more aware of the impact that it can have on the planet, and so a lot more people are influenced by that, and it's sort of a win-win, right? So better for you and also better for the planet. And so I think with those different motivations, people are a lot more open to it now, and really making a shift towards more plant-forward eating.
And there is, though, also among the older athletes, I think still a stigma or a taboo with eating a plant-based or a vegan diet still exists. Do you still get the sense that there is that resistance among that older demographic?
I think there is. I mean, I think there's sort of a percentage of people, or whatever it might be, that just really can't change their ways, and they've been sort of brainwashed by both, what their parents told them and what society believes, and the marketing, right, and the infiltrated science by the animal foods industry, that I think they have a very hard time changing what they eat. And in a lot of ways, it's tied to their identity, right? Especially men who just feel like it's manly to eat animal products. And so I think when you've got a habit that you've been eating that way your whole life, and it's tied to your identity especially, and there's been a lot of marketing, right? And there's also like memories from food, right? So if you were eating bacon with your parents growing up, maybe you've got like fond memories of that, like that smell and that taste ties in with fond memories now. So there's a lot of things working against people making shifts in a healthier direction. And yeah, I think older people are probably a bit more resistant in general.
Is there a way to kind of move the needle for somebody who is so dug in? So, for example, right, you come from the Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC. You think about a person like a Dana White or a commentator, Joe Rogan, very much both extremely skeptical, to say the least, about eating a plant-based diet. I mean, really heels dug in, probably don't want to listen much to the science there at all. I mean, is there a way to start moving that needle? Or when you're dealing with somebody like that, is it just you got to kind of sit back and wait for them to come to you if they ever decide to?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, what we've learned from the behavioral psychology that we looked at is it's really about showcasing role models. And so you need the science, right? But that should hang on the narrative and the stories of these amazing role models. And as you noticed in the film, we had athletes, firefighters, and soldiers. Unfortunately, with Dana and with Joe, they are people's role models in many ways. So you've got to, it's no good if you want someone to believe in your position. There's no good showing them something on the total other end. So if you show them sort of tree-hugging hippies that are super progressive, and they're perhaps a little bit more on the right, like, they're never going to buy into those ideologies. And so you have to have someone that's sort of like-minded, and role models that you can look up to that believe this way and eat in this way.
You have been on Joe Rogan's show, have you not?
I have, yeah. Did a debate against a guy called Chris Kresser, who'd been on an earlier episode trying to debunk the game changers. And I don't think the first hour of the debate went well, over the 3 hours and 45 minutes, because Joe was on his side. And then Joe started to come around and recognize that he'd said that I hadn't lost a single argument against Chris. And so there's a lot of misinformation, and it's tough because I watched the Chris Kresser debunk episode, and I tried to sort of remove myself from what I actually know. And I thought, well, if I was just a regular, person that hadn't read any of this literature, I would actually have found Chris Kresser's episode very convincing, actually. And so I was grateful for Joe to let me on there and do the debate. But I think I clearly won that debate.
I've heard that you have as well. I need to go back and watch that myself, to be honest with you. Did he have any conversations with you after the show? Like any questions that he wanted to ask you that didn't necessarily get brought up during the debate?
With Chris or with Joe?
Joe.
I think we talked a little bit about the Maasai or something, or some hunter-gatherer tribes as a sort of a reason why meat eating was natural and beneficial. Of course, there's a lot of myths around the longevity in those tribes and the actual cases of heart disease, and there's reasons why their cholesterol's low, for example, because they have parasites in the blood that they drink, and the parasites eat the cholesterol. There's a lot of sort of reasons people will give for why you should be eating mostly meat or exclusively meat or whatever around, and the arguments just don't hold any water when you actually look at them. But I think we talked a little bit about that. And of course, in those, I'm not telling other people what they should be eating, especially in different parts of the world. But I don't think we should be pointing to the Inuit or the Maasai as great examples of health either.
I want to shift back to football here. I had a conversation one time with an offensive lineman when he was playing here in Washington. Really a big name. He now plays for the 49ers, a guy by the name of Trent Williams. And he was interested in eating a plant-based diet because diabetes runs so rampant in his family. But as you know, I mean, even without being the biggest football fan in the world, like, if you're going to play on the offensive or the defensive line, you just need to be a massive human being. And one of the things that Trent struggled with was to maintain that mass and still be able to compete. And so he said, well, look, I've got to table this until after I retire. But then, we look at some of the other athletes in the movies, World's Strongest Man, like they don't have this kind of struggle that Trent was having. So have you had conversations with other athletes like Trent who struggle to maintain that mass? And what are some of the tips that you might give them?
Yeah, I've heard that before, and I think people do experience that. Especially when they switch. They're obviously plant-based foods in general have lower caloric density, so that's a great thing when you're trying to lose weight, right? Is that you're hitting those stretch receptors sooner, and so you feel satiated and you don't overeat. Now, of course, on the other way, if you need 6,000, 8,000 calories a day because you're a 325-pound football player, I think it can actually be challenging to get that all completely from whole foods. And so that's, I think, when there's a case for having, a little bit, not heavily processed foods, but some of the lighter processed plant foods, because you can just cram in a lot more calories, right? And so, I don't think having tons and tons of oil is great, but it's very calorically dense, right? And so if you have some olive oil or whatever, that's an easy way to get in calories, as an example. Or eating the higher calorically dense foods. So dried fruit, for example, you can get a lot more calories, right? Or nuts and seeds are pretty high in calories too. So yeah, I think it's just getting in the higher calorically dense food, so you're not feeling totally full and bloated, and not trying to force feed yourself all the time with just tons and tons of vegetables. Obviously, you want to get in the whole grains, legumes, fruits and vegetables, but perhaps a bit more nuts and seeds. And then if you really need to get in 8,000 calories like some of these guys, then getting in some oils and things like that might actually be an easy way to get calories in.
Yeah, and then the funny thing is he had a teammate also who, a smaller guy on the team, played in the defensive secondary, so he didn't need to have this enormous frame. He needed to be light and quick. He too, then he's eating a pescatarian diet at that point, but very, very little fish still. But he had the team install a smoothie station for him that had literally everything you could possibly want to put in there, from your greens to your seeds. He had chia seeds, all kinds of nut butters and fruits and other vegetables that he could always blend up. And so while his teammates were loading up on steak and pork and chicken in between practices, here he is blending up a storm and getting these really calorically dense smoothies that he said really served him so well throughout the season, to the point where late in the year, when everybody else in the locker room is walking around really struggling to move because they're so beaten up, well, here's DJ. He's literally just kind of like skipping down the stairs as if it's the beginning of training camp and his body is daisy fresh. I just thought that the contrast there between those two guys was extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, I think smoothies are, I have a smoothie most days. And one of the main smoothies I have has 750 calories and 35 grams of protein. And that's not with any added protein powder or anything else. Again, I'm not against protein powder, but you can certainly get a lot of protein and a lot of calories from whole foods. I could easily bump that up to 1,000 calories or 1,200 if I really wanted to, but the one I usually have is 750, and that's got hemp seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, a cup of soy milk, some oats, greens, cherries or berries. You can really get a lot of calories and a lot of protein in the smoothie form, and that's a good way for these big guys to get it in as well.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good, James. That actually sounds really good. How many calories do you estimate you're burning off during your workouts?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I haven't tracked it for years. I used to wear different monitors and track my calories and macros and things like that, but haven't done that for years. I mean, it could vary, right? Like a workout could be just 300 calories or it could be 800 calories. I think people forget that most of the calories that you're burning are just from sort of everyday living, right? From your brain taking up a lot of energy and just normal everyday life. So, I mean, you can certainly, burn a lot of calories working out. But people think that that's a great way to lose weight. But in the long term, the studies actually show it's really about what you're eating more than how much you're working out. Typically, the more you work out, the more hungry you are, and so you end up eating more. And so it does seem that like there isn't much benefit actually to exercise in terms of fat loss, independent of the caloric difference, right? So certainly working out is very beneficial for your health. But in terms of weight loss, it's really what you're putting in your mouth that's the most important.
I appreciate you being so generous with your time. We have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to ask you this. This came up recently on a show that I host called The Exam Room, and it was somebody who wrote in, and they were like, "Well, what is the benefit of eating a plant-based diet in terms of cardiovascular fitness? What does an athlete gain from that aside from having less blockages in their arteries? Is that the entire benefit, or what would you say to this person?"
It's not just about blockages in your arteries, right? So one, yes, you're less likely to get calcified buildup and create these lesions inside of the arteries. But you produce more nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator that allows those arteries to open up. And when those arteries open up, that allows more blood flow and more oxygen to get to the muscles and other organs of the body. So that's primarily, it can change also blood viscosity. But you just typically get, your heart rate can come down, less blood pressure. And so you're not like taxing those arterial walls as much. Just better blood flow, which means better oxygen and better nutrients to the muscles really is where it's at. So it's not just about sort of the physical clogging of the arteries. There's also things with like plaque morphology, like the shape of those plaques, in hindering blood flow as well. It's not quite as simple as just sort of clogs in the arteries. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but just better blood flow overall, making it easier on the heart and larger, the blood vessels can dilate or open more and just get you better nutrients and more nutrients and more oxygen to those muscles.
Which also speaks to the benefit of then eating that type of diet for an endurance athlete as well, I would assume.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, totally. From endurance to, there's definitely, different diets can be eaten and people can perform well in the short term, right? But if you want to have longevity, you want faster recovery, you want less inflammation, you want high antioxidants. When you exercise, you create oxidative stress. So you're getting those antioxidants from the plants. But across the board, yeah. First of all, for most sports, right? Like if you're doing shot put or javelin or maybe 100-meter sprint, like the carbohydrates might not be as important there, right? But for most sports, if you're going out for any sort of distance running, if you're playing football or soccer or basketball or martial arts or whatever it is, having a sort of high level of carbohydrates to replenish those glycogen stores is going to be beneficial for athletic performance. Certainly people can sort of get fat adapted and be able to burn more fat. But what people forget is that when you're in that mode where you're burning more fat, you're also eating a lot more fat, so you're depositing more fat. So there's not a net gain of like fat loss there. And so certainly with plant-based diets, you can get plenty of carbs and fiber and so forth. And so just beneficial for health and athletic performance.
How frustrating is it for you, speaking of carbs, that we live in such a carb phobic society when, you and I both know that there are two completely different kinds of carbohydrates in the world, and the carbs that you're talking about here are extremely healthy, yet they get lumped in with the same kind of carbs that would be found in, say, a donut.
Yeah, so basically, white sugar, processed white flour, and so forth. They gave carbs in general a bad name, right? And so actually, if you look at carbohydrate consumption overall, especially carbohydrates from whole foods, you actually have smaller waist circumference and lower body fat. That's totally against what a lot of people think, that carbs make you fat. And then, if you are trying to cut down on carbs, like if you reduce, there's a study done by Harvard in 2018, which looked at replacing carbs, which was largely coming from these processed carbs that we're talking about, with fat and protein. Well, when they switched them out for fat and protein from animal sources, the risk of overall mortality went up by 18% from baseline. If you switched out those high processed carbs for fat and protein from plant-based sources, you actually had an 18% decrease risk of overall mortality from baseline. So, people are often sort of into this sort of macronutrient ratio, thinking that's important, but it's really about the quality of those macronutrients and the quality of that food that's going to make a difference. And in that regard, we're just much better off, shifting towards a much more plant-centric diet.
Just a couple more quick ones here. Are you still working at all as a combat instructor?
Occasionally. Obviously, the pandemic cut that down a little bit, but I still do some with some of the elite government agencies, both in law enforcement. I think the better training they have, the less likely they have to use lethal force, right? If they can arrest someone and not hurt them as much, then they don't need to go to the lethal force. They feel more confident. They don't get as scared. They don't need to go to their firearm. And then also with the military as well. So I'm still doing some of that. But my main focus really is on, plant-based advocacy and helping people, live better lives.
When you do get the opportunity to work with law enforcement and the government agencies, does the topic of nutrition come up, or do you just keep it strictly business?
Yeah, every time now I like to. Usually people that come to a seminar or a class have, some of them have seen the film and start asking about it just sort of naturally, and it's really been interesting to see the amount of those people that have already made the switch. For firefighters, law enforcement, military, sort of the groups that you wouldn't have originally anticipated switching towards more plant-based or completely vegan diets. I'm certainly seeing a lot of that, but yeah, it always comes up and there's a lot of questions about that. There's some myths that they've heard that they continue to believe that they ask me about, and I clarify those. But it's great to see those types of people getting on board.
And let's do what we call in the business here a tease. I know that there's not a whole lot that you can tell us about the Game Changers Institute, but it sounds like you're really building upon this great foundation that the movie has laid. So what can you tell us, as much as you can, about this?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So yeah, the Game Changers Institute is a research, education, and advocacy platform promoting plant-forward eating. So we've already put a couple of things out in the peer-reviewed literature. So there's one on the flaws of the DS protein scoring system, which is sort of this newer protein scoring system, which favors, of course, animal foods. And, obviously, if you go back and look at the history of it, it was really the dairy industry that pushed that. And surprise, surprise, the dairy industry now has the highest score on this scoring system. There's a bunch of flaws with it. So there's a paper out on that. I believe you can get to it through the GameChangersInstitute.com website. And then we also, Chief Science Officer also put out one on creatine recently and how that can affect athletic performance, whether that creatine is coming from animal products or whether it's coming from supplements, and showing that actually coming from supplements is actually more beneficial in terms of athletic performance. So we're putting out some papers in the peer-reviewed literature. We're working on a research project with a major university with regards to the microbiome and athletic performance. And we've also become the exclusive nutrition partner for the Green Sports Alliance, which is another nonprofit which is focused on the greening of sports, whether that be, energy reduction, changing light bulbs. And every major league in the United States is a member of the Green Sports Alliance, NFL, MLB, and so on. And we've become their exclusive nutrition partner, and we are working on putting out literature, for all the teams that are members and the leagues, 200 stadiums and venues. And so we're proud to be working with them. That's another great organization for people to check out, the Green Sports Alliance.
Are you able to work with players' unions at all and go directly to the athletes themselves?
We could do, but we focused on, I gave a talk at an NLB sort of physicians conference. So we're working more with the dietitians and the doctors, and then sort of the team level rather than at the individual level. But again, as I said earlier, we are getting a lot of athletes reaching out, asking for, help with nutrition. And so we are doing some of that as well.
And final question to you is kind of the inspirational one. In the movie, as a young man, the kid that you showed up there, that the film that your family had, you loved Superman, and we saw you in a cape, I do believe, at one point. Um, do you feel now kind of like Superman? Like, how has your vision for your future changed? So many of us feel like our family's history with heart disease will become our history with heart disease or diabetes or any one of the diseases that we've talked about here today. Now, knowing what you do about nutrition and eating the way that you do, living the lifestyle that you do, how has your own vision for your future changed?
Well, I think I mean, when I got into this, it was quite selfish, right? I was looking at increasing my, speeding up my recovery and increasing my athletic performance. But as I sort of understand more around public health and what's happening to the planet and the animals, I mean, there's just so many reasons to help people shift towards plant-based eating. And so I'm proud of the impact that the film had with it becoming seemingly the most viewed documentary of all time with over 100 million views. We had 1.5 billion media impressions, including 40,000 organic press articles. Interest in plant-based eating more than tripled worldwide within a couple of weeks of the film coming out on Netflix, according to Google Trends. We also had an analyst recently run the data, and it looks like 75% of the increased interest in plant-based eating since 2004 is a direct result of the film. And so I'm proud to have had that impact. And that's really, once I realized the damage that animal foods were doing both to people and the planet, I became very motivated. That's really become my focus, is encouraging people to shift towards more plant-forward diets. And so it's totally changed. Like, if you'd have asked me that when I was fighting, I never thought I'd be involved with nutrition or, heavily involved with plant-based eating, certainly. And so it's definitely changed the direction of my life. But I'm proud that we've made an impact. And of course, it's not just me, it's the whole team at Game Changers, especially Joseph Pace, the other producer and main writer of the film. But it's the whole team, right, that we had with the film and now with Game Changers Institute. And so it's that collective work that we're doing, which I think is making an impact in the world.
Well, brother, you are definitely a mover and shaker. The entire team is. And looking forward to seeing you Sunday, April 24th at the Fairfax Veg Fest in Herndon, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. James Wilks, appreciate your time, my friend.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it.
If your health IQ was a couple of points higher than it was a few minutes ago, go ahead and like this video or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And to take it even higher, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your favorite shows. Look for The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. Hit the subscribe button there as well and help to make your world a healthier place.